What if the most dangerous hiring mistake your company is making right now is looking for good, honest people? In a cutthroat corporate landscape, the most dominant leader in history proved that absolute virtue is a luxury of the weak and built a billion-dollar empire by actively headhunting the corrupt, the ruthless, and the outcasts, as long as they delivered flawless metrics. One, the sourcing revolution. Integrity is a luxury, competence is a currency. The virtue decoupling. While traditional, risk-averse organizations paralyze their growth by filtering talent through superficial cultural alignment, focus groups, and rigid moral correctness, Cao Cao executed a total paradigm shift. He shattered ancient norms by issuing his historic decrees for the talented, stating flatly that even if a candidate was unfilial, greedy, corrupt, or universally despised, if they possessed the rare, lethal intellect required to win a market war, engineer a breakthrough, or optimize a broken supply chain, he would hire them. In the modern office, this means stripping away the toxic HR gaslighting that prioritizes agreeableness over assets. A nice guy who misses deadlines, acts passively, and mismanages data is a liability to the bottom line, while a difficult, abrasive jerk who consistently 10x's your revenue is a core enterprise asset. Cao Cao understood that you cannot pay your organizational overhead with your team's good intentions or polite smiles. You build empires with raw capability and cold execution, not polite, well-mannered incompetence. 2. The golden cage strategy. Satiate the asset, hold the leverage, premium utility rental. When Cao Cao encountered elite talent, he completely bypassed empty corporate platitudes about family value, pizza parties, or shared cultural purpose. He bought their utility at the highest premium available on the open market. When he captured the legendary General Guan Yu, he famously showered him with gold, fine silks, high titles, and prestigious banquets every 3 days. He knew down to his core that Guan Yu's ultimate personal loyalty lay with his chief rival, Liu Bei. But Cao Cao didn't waste a single drop of cognitive energy begging for Guan Yu's soul or crying over his lack of emotional attachment. He simply rented his lethal battlefield leverage for the immediate campaign. In your career or business, if you want to retain top performers, stop feeding them slogans and corporate merchandise. Feed their wallets and their status. Pay them so aggressively that stepping out of line, slacking off, or leaving for a competitor becomes a financially catastrophic decision for their lifestyle. 3. Asymmetric asset allocation. Exploiting flaws for high yield return. Cognitive allocation. Cao Cao was a master of cognitive mapping. He spent hours analyzing the precise psychological blind spots, egos, hidden greed, and toxic traits of his advisors and generals. He didn't try to fix their personal flaws, change their personalities, or force them through mandatory corporate empathy workshops. Instead, he treated them like highly specialized, high-performance tools. If a strategist was notoriously greedy but brilliantly analytical, he placed them directly in charge of logistics where their innate greed drove hyper-efficiency while keeping the compliance guardrails locked brutally tight around them. True executive intelligence is knowing exactly how to arrange the chess pieces so that an employee's unique, raw genius is fully weaponized on the front lines, while their structural and personal weaknesses are entirely neutralized by the ironclad architecture of the department. 4. Pure transactional alignment. Decoupling mission from emotion. The transactional framework. For Cao Cao, every single relationship within his massive war machine was strictly driven by transactional alignment and operational execution. He never allowed personal affection, nostalgia, or long nights spent in the trenches to cloud his data or soften his judgment. He accepted the baseline psychological reality that human beings are fundamentally fickle creatures, driven entirely by shifting incentives, self-preservation, and personal leverage. When you run a department, the exact millisecond you treat your team like a personal family, you lose your executive edge. You begin tolerating mediocrity out of sentimentality and making excuses for missed targets. The master corporate strategist maintains an razor-sharp psychological boundary. You can deeply respect an individual's output and reward them lavishly without ever exposing your strategic vulnerabilities or opening your heart to them. The 5. Swift structural de-risking, slaying the sacred cows, the zero sentiment liquidation. The moment a top-performing asset, personal agenda, arrogance, or ego conflicted with the grand corporate vision, Cao Cao liquidated them without a single drop of hesitation or remorse. Look at his chief advisor, Xun Yu, the literal architect of his empire. The moment Xun Yu opposed Cao Cao's ultimate political climb to supreme power, Cao Cao didn't look at his 20 years of flawless service. He sent Xun Yu an empty food box, a silent, chilling psychological message that his utility had reached absolute zero. Xun Yu took the hint and committed suicide hours later. In the modern workspace, a brilliant high performer who begins believing they are bigger than the company, or who starts undermining your leadership authority in Slack channels and board meetings, is a terminal cancer. No matter their past contributions or how many years of loyalty they have on their resume, you must cut them loose immediately. If you tolerate a toxic superstar, you tell the rest of the organization that your rules are entirely negotiable. Number 6. The containment of brilliant arrogance. The Yangshu president. The intellectual guardrail. Cao Cao hired hyper-intelligent people, but he fiercely guarded his operational narrative and strategic boundaries. His assistant, Yangshu, was a genius who consistently used his intellect to read Cao Cao's hidden thoughts, showing off his cleverness in front of the lower staff and leaking strategic intentions before they were formally announced. Cao Cao had him promptly executed for disrupting military discipline. In corporate terms, this is your hyper-smart, cynical employee who thinks they can outsmart the executive suite, leaking sensitive, restructuring information, or gossiping about board decisions to make themselves feel important. Intellectual brilliance is worse than useless if it creates organizational instability and splits team alignment. When an employee uses their intelligence to cause friction, fracture execution, and show off, their cleverness becomes a weapon used directly against your leadership. 7. The Paranoia paradox. Engineering tactical distance. Strategic deterrence. Cao Cao famously proclaimed, "I would rather betray the world than let the world betray me." His legendary paranoia wasn't a mental defect. It was a highly calculated, defensive strategy designed to prevent organizational complacency and entitlement. He went so far as to fake a psychological condition where he would murder people in his sleep, deliberately executing a close guard who tried to adjust his blanket during a nap. After that terrifying incident, no one ever dared to approach his bed or try to catch him off guard. While you shouldn't literally threaten your staff, the psychological lesson for the boardroom is profound. Never let your team become too comfortable around your leverage. True executive presence requires a calculated degree of tactical distance. If your team thinks they completely understand your next move or can easily predict your boundaries, they will naturally begin testing those boundaries to see what they can get away with. 8. The ultimate market verdict. Fear and fidelity. The empirical dictator. The ultimate paradox of Cao Cao's leadership is that, despite being a ruthless, terrifying dictator who ruled with a blood-stained fist, his followers were fiercely ready to die for him on the battlefield. Why? Because his system was absolutely predictable. Under Cao Cao, if you perform, your rewards were absolute, undeniable, and life-changing. If you failed or betrayed the system, your elimination was guaranteed. He did not run on fake promises, HR jargon, or corporate gaslighting. He ran on empirical, observable metrics. High performers don't actually leave an organization because a leader is tough, demanding, or distant. They leave when the system is unfair, overly political, and unrewarding. By providing absolute clarity of rewards and consequences, Cao Cao built the most loyal, high-executing workforce of his century. Cao Cao's bloodstained legacy completely dismantles the naive, soft-hearted corporate myth that leadership is a popularity contest driven by emotional vulnerability and unreciprocated affection. True operational scale, long-term survival, and market dominance require an unyielding, unapologetic focus on empirical meritocracy, absolute accountability, and an ironclad protection of your own leverage. You can buy, leverage, and deploy the brilliant brains of an entire army of professionals, but the exact millisecond you give away your heart, you hand them the precision blade they will inevitably use to dethrone you when the incentives shift. The workplace is a marketplace of value, nothing more, nothing less. By removing the emotional fog from your management strategy, you gain the clarity required to build an empire. You treat people with radical fairness. You reward them with undeniable wealth, but you guard your center with a fortress of absolute independence. A question for you. Take a cold, calculated look at your own division or your career trajectory. Are you still trying to manage your team through the fragile, volatile hope of emotional loyalty? Or are you finally ready to build a bulletproof system of value where your leverage is absolute and your position is completely untouchable?